Here is a stat that stops most of the women that I talk to cold when I share it with them. So, up to 70% of women report unexplained weight gain during perimenopause, despite no significant changes to their diet or exercise routine. Not 10%, not 20%, 7 out of 10 women. And when they go looking for answers, most are told to eat less and move more. So they do, and it gets worse. Today, I want to talk about why that happens and why the answer has almost nothing to do with how hard you're trying or the effort that you're putting in.
Welcome to the Fitness Simplified podcast. I'm Brooke Davis, women's functional nutritionist and fitness specialist with Elysian Women's Wellness, and I'm here to simplify your fitness.
Today's episode is one that is such a hot topic and one that I just can't stop talking about enough because it's a conversation that more women need to hear. And it's one that I wish that I had access to about a decade ago before I spent so much time making every single mistake that I'm about to describe. We're talking about fat loss resistance, specifically why it shows up, why it gets worse the harder you push, and what's actually driving it for women in midlife. So let's get into it. When a woman 35, 40 starts gaining weight, especially around her belly, the default advice she gets is painfully predictable. Is track your food, create a deficit, be more consistent. Look, obviously those are important concepts. Calories matter, movement matters, but here's what the advice completely ignores. The metabolic environment that those strategies are being applied to. Okay. And yes, if we don't have data, we don't have a starting point, we can't know where we're going. If you don't know where you're at, you can't know where you're going. Yes, tracking food is important. Creating a deficit is important, but you cannot create a deficit off of metabolic dysfunction. Okay? We'll talk about why here in a second. But the reality of it is that a 42-year-old woman in perimenopause is not operating in the same metabolic environment as a 28-year-old. The rules have genuinely changed. And if you keep applying the same rules to a different game, you're gonna keep losing. Metabolic slowdown in midlife is not just not trying hard enough. In some cases, they're doing too much. You're doing too much. This is systemic dysfunction. This is your body responding very logically to the set of signals that it's getting. It is not an effort problem. It is a strategy. I want to share something personal here because it's going to sound very familiar to a lot of you. So I spent about 4 years in the competitive fitness world. And in this time, learned everything there was to know about macros. I was meticulously tracking, weighing every bite, low fat, low calorie, low carb. My training schedule was 2+ hour lifts, cardio on top of that. Plus I was teaching HIIT classes and coaching. And honestly, I loved every single bit of it, but my body did not. Signs were there. I usually lost my cycle close to show, which is unfortunately common in competition prep. And it always came back until it didn't. After nationals, I had actually lost my cycle for about 3 months and it didn't come back for another 6 post. And this was not only obviously the time that I would told my husband I would stop competing so that we could start trying to have kids, but I also realized that that's not ideal for health. I knew I wanted to have kids one day. I didn't know much about hormone health at the time, but I knew that that was going to matter and that something had to change. So I did stop competing at that point and I gained about 30, almost 40 pounds after that show. And while obviously some of it was needed, my body was completely starving for it. It happened way too fast. It was extremely uncomfortable. I was technically overweight at that point. I was so over tracking macros. I never wanted to touch a food scale again. And so I did what a lot of women do when they want to feel in control without the rigidity of tracking. I just stopped eating. I started playing with fasting and I didn't stop eating. I knew I had to eat, but I went with a 16-8 and then 18-6, 20 and 4. And then I went full day fast. The longest one I did was almost 52 hours. But I didn't change my training at all, was working. It was a mess, right? My workouts were miserable. I was getting headaches. I was exhausted. I have so much brain fog. I could barely think. And when I did eat, it was just whatever I could grab and I would gorge myself because I was so hungry. And so clearly this was not sustainable, right? But what I didn't understand at the time was that everything I was trying, the over restriction, everything I had done prior, the excessive training, the prolonged fasting, it was all doing the same thing to my body. It was stress. It was telling my body, slow down, hold on to that energy, prioritize those nutrients in this survival over fat loss. That is my body, my physiology doing exactly what it was designed to do. And this was a turning point where I really started digging into what the body actually needed for hormone health, what foods has helped support fertility, metabolism, how to train properly for hormones. And turning point for me changed how I work with women today and how I see what happens to the women in midlife that I'm working with. And at that point, I was not actually in midlife. I was young. I was like 24. No, I guess I was 27, 26, 27. But the response is the same. When you are in hormonal downregulation, when you are not producing hormones, it is the same response as early perimenopause. And so it can happen at any point. Your body just becomes more sensitive to these stressors as you age. But the reality is that your body doesn't just randomly decide to stop burning fat one day. And that's the real misconception when we're like, it just happened out of nowhere. There's always a reason for it. And in most cases, for women in midlife, that reason is one of the following systems being under stress. So the hormonal system we know happens, but the nervous system, the gut, the adrenals, your energy system, so thyroid. When any of these are dysregulated, fat oxidation, which is your body's ability to actually burn fat as fuel, can be impaired. You can be in a calorie deficit, but still not be burning fat efficiently. And that is like measurable. The other part of this is that your hormonal stage changes your metabolic priorities. So perimenopause isn't just necessarily a reproductive transition. This is a full metabolic recalibration, essentially. So the declining estrogen affects insulin sensitivity, your progesterone shifts affect cortisol regulation. Your entire body is actually impacted by these hormonal shifts. And they also directly impact where your body stores fat and how readily it's going to let it go. And this is why the strategies that worked in your 20s and 30s stop working in your 40s. The body's priorities have changed, and the strategy then has to change with them. The other point is that chronic dieting suppresses metabolic output. So this is adaptation, again, comes back to physiology. If you have been in and out of dieting, restricting your calories for years and years, trying to lose fat, gaining it back, your body has downregulated its metabolic rate in response to these repeated energy shortage signals. This is metabolic adaptation. Our bodies are extremely efficient. So it means that the deficit you need to keep losing weight keeps getting lower and lower until eventually you are depleting nutrients. When you continue to try and create that deficit, you are also, you're a calorie deficit and energy deficit. You're also creating a nutrient deficit. So you are essentially dieting your way into metabolic dysfunction. Number 4 is that stress load affects fat oxidation directly. So cortisol, we all know what that is, that can directly inhibit fat burning. Specifically, it impacts the visceral fat in the abdominal region. And stress isn't just emotional. Undereating is a stressor. Overtraining is a stressor. Poor sleep is a stressor. Skipping meals is a stressor. Alcohol is a stressor. Every time you are pushing your body harder, when it's already in this stressed response, it's going to create more of a problem. And I see this pattern week after week with clients and women that I talk to. Number 5 is that fat burning does require systemic. This is not just a work harder issue. And that is, I think, the biggest mindset reframe that needs to come along with midlife, because we're so used to just being able to grind, grind, grind. And again, hardworking career women, stay-at-home moms, we're always like, okay, I can just work harder, I can push through it. This has to be strategic. This is not something that you can just grind through. And again, this is the reframe that is going to change things. Fat loss is not a punishment that you endure until you hit your goal. This is a byproduct of a body that is nourished, that is supported, and is able to prioritize fat loss because everything else is taken care of. And when you stop forcing those results and you start supporting your metabolism and thinking of it that way, everything is going to change. Before I keep going, I want to pause here really quick because I know some of you are listening to this and you're thinking, okay, but how do I actually figure out which one of these, where to prioritize? And that is exactly what the functional fat loss assessment is designed to answer. It's a free quiz. It takes about 5 minutes and 3 to 5 minutes. And instead of giving you just generic advice to spit back out, it actually identifies which metabolic system is most likely driving your fat loss resistance based on your patterns, your history, your symptoms. This is not a one size fits all answer. It's not just going to spit out something generic. It is designed based on your answers. So the link is in the show notes and the description. So go take it now or bookmark it for after the episode. Either way, do it because it's going to give you a completely different lens for everything that we are talking about here today and something coming up that you are going to want to tune into. All right, let's get back to it. So I want to describe someone to you, and I assume this will sound familiar. I had a client, she had done it all, right? All the quick fixes that promise these fast results, a macro counting, 7 days a week training routine. She had followed every plan she'd ever given with serious commitment, right? She went hard. She was not lacking discipline. She had been gaining and losing the same weight for about 30 years. And we're talking, she is exhausted, and not just physically, but mentally. You are exhausted in a specific way that comes from working incredibly hard and putting this effort in and feeling like you have nothing to show for it. And here's what I told her, and this is what I want to tell you. This is not your failure. And I know it can feel like it. It can be really unmotivating, it can be very frustrating, but this is, again, the strategy. It is honestly what most diets are designed to do for you because the diet industry wants you coming back. They want you in this vicious cycle. They are not here for the long-term game. So the problem is that strategy, most of the strategies out there, not only are not designed for women in midlife, but they are not designed for long-term success. And if the strategy doesn't account for the actual state of your body, your hormones, your stress load, your metabolic history, effort alone is not ever going to be enough. You can be the most disciplined woman in the room and still not get results if your strategy, if your practices or diet is working against your physiology. That is the mismatch between what is happening in our diet industry and women's physiology in midlife. That is the reality. So, where do you go from here? What actually does work? Outside of going and taking the functional fat loss assessment, I'm going to give you a totally honest answer. It depends on your system. And that is why that assessment is the key. For some women, the primary driver is chronic cortisol elevation, and the fix is less training, eating more. For others, it's a gut health issue that's impairing nutrient absorption. It's creating systemic inflammation that blocks fat oxidation. For others, it's years of restriction that have suppressed thyroid output and downregulated metabolic rate and energy production, right? There is no just across the board universal fix. And it's actually really good news for you because it means the reason that generic plan that you were following didn't work has nothing to do necessarily with you. It wasn't built for you. If your body feels like it's fighting against everything that you're trying to make it do, it's because the strategy is not meant for you. So the first step is figuring out which system needs support. And that is where our quiz comes in. So make sure you go and take that. Also, we have a webinar coming up. It is the Functional Fat Loss Protocol. And we are going to talk about each system, what it entails, how to get the data that you really need outside of our assessment. Because let's be honest, the assessment is great, but it's just a questionnaire. So how to get true data on each system, what that looks like, and how to actually then approach what you get out of that data. Okay, so most importantly, what I want you to take away from today is this. Fat loss resistance after 40 is a data and a systems problem. The solution is not just to try harder to grind through it. That's actually going to make it worse. Your metabolism is simply responding, again, to the data and the groundwork that it has. And once you understand what it's responding to, you can actually start doing things that are going to move the needle. So step number 1 is going to be go and take the functional fat loss assessment, see what it tells you, let that be your first insight. Step number 2 is going to get the link in the show notes. And as soon as you're done with the assessment, make sure to go register for the webinar. So everything I have been walking you through today, the 6 systems that impact why your effort stops working, what's actually driving this fat loss resistance, I'm going to break it all down live on a free webinar called the Functional Fat Burn Protocol Masterclass. And this is not a replay of today's episode. It is the next step. We're going deep into how each of these systems gets assessed, what the patterns actually look like in real women, what it takes to restore metabolic function instead of just, again, hitting up against a brick wall. So if you've been listening to this thinking, this finally makes sense of what's actually happening in my body, this webinar is where you get the full pictures and some better answers. It's free, it's live. We'll be taking questions at the end. There's also a surprise at the end. Anybody who comes live will get our 7-day Metabolic Reignite mini course. And then we also have a surprise at the end for everyone. Register. The link is in the show notes and the description below. So make sure to put it in your calendar. It is March 18th at 4:30 p.m. PST, 7:30 EST, because really this is the training that I wish somebody had handed me years before I spent spinning my wheels trying to make everything worse. So I'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Fitness Simplified podcast. We're stoked to have you join us on your journey to better health and fitness. If you're feeling stuck, either doing all the right things or just really not sure what steps to take next, head to the show notes and take our free functional fat loss assessment to see where your roadblocks are and get your best next steps completely personalized to you. If you have any questions, suggestions for future topics, or just want to chat, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at Brooke_Elysian and Facebook linked in the show notes, or via our website, ElysianWomen'sWellness.com. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we'd be thrilled if you could take a half second to leave us a 5-star rating and review so you can help others find our show. If there was something you heard that was helpful or impactful, please screenshot it, tag me, and share what it was so we can bring you more. Plus, you'll be entered into our monthly Legion giveaway. New episodes drop every other Monday, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Thanks for listening. Also, just a reminder that the information shared through Elysian Women's Wellness, including this podcast, is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.